Hello. So, today, I would like to talk to you about Proviso East High School, which is the high school for the district that I live in. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I got into a debate with a business owner from the main street in town who I used to work for her. And we were debating because, and this was on Facebook, a public debate. Other people jumped in, made their comments, but the reason we were debating is because there's been this buzz going around my town about a push to get new school board and superintendent positions, to give new people, to elect new people into the positions of school board and superintendent. And I made a comment on the local newspaper page on Facebook because they posted an article about it and I saw it on my news feed. And so I made a comment saying that you're basically just changing out the captain on a sinking ship, and it doesn't matter who's running it. We've tried this before a million times to get new people in, saying that these new people will be better than the old people, but over and over and over again, this has failed, and it's going to fail again. And what we don't need are just new captains on the same old sinking ship. We need to let the system go right down the toilet, burn off all the old dead undergrowth, so to speak, and let new opportunities arise, open up the market to education. Because I don't see how education in math or science or literature is any different from being educated in piano or gymnastics. So there should be a market for these things. And so I'm making this argument. But another point that I made, the more central point that I'm going to talk about in this video, is that the reason that people don't send their kids to Proviso, for example, my mom, who's a single mom, worked alone to support me, and yet she spent thousands of dollars during my high school career sending me to a private high school. Because Proviso East, it's not because Proviso East is underfunded. It's not because their school board has been squandering money. It's not because the kids don't have the most up-to-date textbooks. The reason is that Proviso East is unsafe, especially if you are white, because the majority of Proviso East students are black kids from a very poor neighborhood, and Proviso East itself is set in the neighborhood. It's located in the neighborhood of Maywood, Illinois. And Maywood, Illinois has one of the highest crime rates in America. It has one of the highest violent crime rates in America. You can look this up. And it's extremely unsafe. So that's the reason why people don't send their kids to Proviso. It's not because they're not getting the funding. It's not because of embezzlement of the funds or because they have a corrupt school board. It's because it's unsafe. And there's a history to this that I've been looking up. Because I looked up articles to give examples of these like brawls that happen at Proviso. Like 300 student brawl happens at Proviso, or kids getting shot on their way home from school, or kids getting beat up in the hallways and the security guards doing nothing about it because it seems like such a normal thing. They're just not even going to intervene. So I was looking at these articles, and then I started reading into the actual history of Proviso East, which is fascinating. At the start, during the World War II period and post-World War 50s and such, it was, the vast majority was white European students who went there. And the neighborhoods surrounding it were vast majority white European. And during the 60s, which Wikipedia describes as a demographic shift, when government programs were going into effect that were breaking up white neighborhoods and inserting lower income African Americans into these neighborhoods and changing the demographic face of these neighborhoods, and white flight was happening. White people, instead of standing up and defending their neighborhoods, they would just run away farther into the suburbs. And so in the 60s, this was what was happening in that neighborhood and in that high school. And so the demographics were shifting. And in 1968, September of 1968, homecoming was occurring at this high school, at Proviso East. And the homecoming committee which was majority white, selected 5 white girls as the contestants for homecoming queen. Now, at the time, there was already a significant minority of blacks at the school, and massive fights broke out at the cafeteria in response to the fact that the whole selection of homecoming contestants were white girls. And so these huge fights, basically riots, broke out, and gasoline bombs were thrown, property was destroyed, people were carrying around tire irons. Big fights were happening. They had to call in state troopers. 100 state troopers were called in, and the principal came out and made a statement basically saying, oh, we'll have a more diverse committee, do a reselection, and we'll have it equal racially. And but that didn't really help, because the next day another big fight broke out in the cafeteria again. And this time, one of the main instigators of the fight wasn't even a student at the school, which is interesting in and of itself, especially given that the date was 1968, and at that time other student riots and protests were happening, and in Germany especially. And so the fact that one of the instigators wasn't even a student at the school, and it happened at the cafeteria of the school, and the NAACP was involved, encouraging students to strike, and all this was happening. Part of me once makes me think that it's a project that was happening, but I have no evidence for that. It's just the sense that I get that all these events were happening at around the same time. It reeks of a government project. But so these tensions continued to escalate, and over the next few months there were parents were called in to patrol the halls to stop fights. Police were called in to patrol the halls. Most of the school, 2/3 of the school, ended up just not going to classes because it wasn't safe. And this all happened because of racial tensions, where they selected too many white people to be on the homecoming committee. And this was happening 40, 50 years ago. So that is sort of the history of what has led up to this point today. And today, Proviso East is a shithole. It is dangerous. Nobody wants to go there. Not even your average black kid who kind of has to go there, or who lives in that neighborhood. They don't want to go there. Everybody understands that it's dangerous. Which is a shame, because the school itself is beautiful. The buildings and the grounds that it's on, it sits right by the Des Plaines River, which sits right by the Des Plaines River, which is banked by a very old growth forest with, actually, it contains some of Illinois' oldest ash trees, hundreds of year old ash trees in this very old growth forest that sits right behind the school. So it's like, it's picturesque. It really is. So it's a shame that it's turned into such a shithole. But the point being is that it's not a shithole because it lacks funding. It's a shithole because of the people who go there and because of the neighborhood that it is situated in. And these problems are not going to be solved by throwing money at the school. You're not going to be able to solve the rampant crime that goes on in Maywood by throwing money at the school. You're not even addressing the primary issue, which is that these low-income black communities, first of all, will always have racial tensions with white people. There's always going to be racial tensions. We have to take that for granted. It's like people who, on an individual basis, of course, you could be friends with people of other races. But when it comes to large groups and their interests and their cultures as a whole, there's going to be conflict and tension. So that's one. The other is that the welfare state and the welfare benefits programs have, and other people have talked about this at such a great extent, so I'm not going to get into this, but they've destroyed the homes of so many people. They've caused so many children to grow up with single parents in broken homes where they depend on the government for almost everything to survive. And so these kids are being raised without any guidance. And if parents aren't involved in a child's life and they're not getting good discipline and guidance at home, then a school's not going to help. It's going to make things worse even. It's not going to help. So, my point is that the school is not going to be transformed by a bigger budget or by better people in charge. Because the character of the school is not determined by who's in charge. It's determined by who attends. It's determined by its general student populace and the parents and the families that they come from. So this feel-good push where they think that they're solving these problems, or they think that they're going to, because the main response that I got from these people was not that I was wrong. It's that you don't want to help. We just really want to help. So step aside while we try to make things better. Like, it's such a feel-good, virtue signaling thing to say, we're going to make things better. We're going to put our buddies in charge, and they're going to do the right thing when nobody else has ever done the right thing. It has nothing to do with that. You could have, the most saintly and pure-hearted people in charge, and the problems would persist because the problems are social and they're embedded in the community. And they're not just economic problems. It's not just poverty that's causing these things. It's the culture. It's the lack of guidance in these children's lives when they're growing up. And it's the racial conflicts and tensions that will never be resolved on a large scale. So, and that's been demonstrated throughout the entire history of Proviso East. Ever since these major events happened in the late 60s. It's been a slow and steady decline and shift where white people just leave. They don't want to have to deal with it. So they just fly away, and the school is left to the lower income blacks. So changing the school board, changing the superintendent, it's not going to help. It's not going to really transform anything other than the people's lives who actually become commissioners or superintendents or whatever. So anyways, little history of my area. Thank you for watching.